New movies this week include
Tim Burton's Corpse Bride, a stop-motion animation from Tim Burton, which he, of course, has co-directed, but he does actually get a directorial credit on this, unlike, for example, Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, which was directed by Henry Selick. Story is one young man, voiced by Johnny Depp, called Victor, is rehearsing his marriage vows to a bride who he loves but is equally one, but he can't get the vows right, so he stumbles out into the woods and practices his vows on something sticking out of the ground, which looks, like a twig in the shape of a hand. He puts the ring on the twig. He says his marriage vows, only to discover that he has married the corpse bride, the dead bride, underground, voiced by Helena Bonham Carter, who then drags him down into the fantastically colourful underworld. So the remainder of the movie is he has to decide whether or not to stay with the corpse bride, to whom he is now wedded, or to go back to the land of the living to marry his actual bride, who, of course, lives in the land of the living, which is far more drab than the underworld. This being a Tim Burton movie, Tim Burton, was a goth who grew up in California and always considers himself to be, a bit weird and a bit oddball, and he was always into monster movies and Vincent Price and all the rest of it. He's made loads and loads of movies in which the central character is a kind of spiky-haired loner. I mean, think, for example, of Edward Scissorhands, or think of, Vincent, his early cartoon. This, I think, is one of Burton's, most personal films. I absolutely loved it. For a start, I think it's completely true that kids enjoy ghoulish humour. I mean, I grew up, reading famous Monsters of Movieland and Fangoria magazine and, watching old Hammer reruns, and they didn't do me no harm. They were the thing that...
Well, that's questionable.
No, but they really were the thing that gave me great pleasure. And I think nowadays... people have sort of this strange idea that if you're making movies for kids, they have to be saccharine sweet and they have to be, nice and coated in sugar and all the rest of it. It's absolute nonsense. Kids like the ghoulishness. Now, I know that some parents may have a problem with taking their kids to see a movie which has the word corpse in the title. Don't be put off by that. No, obviously, it's not for everyone. There are certain moments, there's beautifully on the BBFC description, it's a PG, and it says contains mildly scary scenes. Mildly scary scenes, I don't know how you define that, because the gags are basically all about a bunch of dead people in the underworld. There's
isn't that a bit like saying slightly funny jokes? I mean,
yes, exactly.
Something is either scary or
not. And, I mean, I personally don't think that you would be scared by it, but let me describe a scenario. The Helena Bonham Carter character has an eyeball which keeps falling out, and in her skull is a maggot. And the maggot is basically the voice of her conscience or her alter ego. And, if she rolls her eyes at her boyfriend has to roll them back again. There's another bit in which he meets his dog, who is in the underworld because his dog is dead, and he says, hey, play dead. Oh, sorry. And then he has to play fetch with his... I mean, it's like all the ghoulish, morbid humour that it ought to be. But the kicker of it is that there is more life in the underworld, that there is more colour in the underworld, there is more humour in the underworld. It's everything that's happening up on the ground that is boring and grey and drab. Now, I absolutely love that. And I think... if you are slightly on that, what's the Addams thing? They're fabulous and kooky, and if you're ooky, kooky, spooky and all the rest of it, then you will absolutely love it. Yes, it's probably true that very straight, very easily distressed young kids probably won't get the glorious ghoulish nature of it. So it's probably, very young kids, very sensitive kids, kids who haven't, an issue with anything to do with it, fine. In that case, but honestly, I thought it was lovely. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was charming. I thought it was funny. I thought it was personal. I thought it was beautifully designed. And how great to see stop-motion animation come back, because, CGI has lent such a sheen to everything. And, of course, it has a score by Danny Elfman, better songs, incidentally, than Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, although they're both on the same kind of slightly creepy, slightly strange, slightly off-kilter in a very, very lovely fashion.
Sounds a bit like Beetlejuice.
Yeah, well, because I love Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is a fantastic film. There's a brilliant line in Beetlejuice when the Michael Keaton character, that he's saying that he's terribly evil. And they say, well, how can you prove that you're evil? He says, how can I prove it? I've seen The Exorcist 20 times and it just gets funnier.
Funny how that would appeal.
It is. I loved it. I really, really like Corpse Bride.
And then, of course, Michael Keaton went on to make one of the worst movies of all time.
Which one was
Jack
that?
Frost.
Oh, yes. Awful. There's no dad. Snow Dad's better than no dad.